The Arctic region, once perceived as a desolate and impenetrable icy wasteland, is rapidly transforming. This transformation is unlocking vast, previously inaccessible natural resources. Estimates suggest the Arctic holds significant global reserves. Around 13% of the world's undiscovered oil is thought to lie beneath its thawing surface. Furthermore, approximately 30% of the world's undiscovered natural gas is also believed to be located here. These figures, highlighted by a US Geological Survey in 2009, underscore the immense economic potential attracting global attention. The allure of these hydrocarbons is a primary driver for increasing geopolitical interest in the region, setting the stage for new dynamics among Arctic and non-Arctic states alike. Beyond oil and gas, the Arctic's resource potential extends to valuable minerals. Greenland, for instance, is known to possess significant deposits of rare earth metals. These metals are crucial components in modern technologies, ranging from smartphones to renewable energy systems. Siberia, a vast expanse of Russian territory, also holds substantial energy supplies and other mineral wealth. As global demand for these resources continues to grow, the Arctic's strategic importance escalates. This increasing focus on resource extraction, however, brings with it complex challenges, including environmental concerns and the potential for international disputes over ownership and access. The once quiet North is becoming a focal point of global resource strategy. The melting Arctic ice, a direct consequence of climate change, is the key catalyst making these resources more accessible. Previously, the formidable ice cover made exploration and extraction prohibitively expensive and technically challenging. Now, retreating glaciers and thinning sea ice are opening up new areas for potential development. This environmental shift is not merely an ecological concern, it is a geopolitical game changer. Nations are re-evaluating their Arctic policies and investments, spurred by the prospect of new economic opportunities. The pursuit of these opportunities is intensifying competition, as countries vie for influence and control over these newly reachable riches. This burgeoning resource rush is reminiscent of historical scrambles for territory and wealth in other parts of the world. However, the Arctic context is unique, characterized by a fragile environment and a complex existing framework of international law. The potential for economic windfalls is weighed against the risks of ecological damage and the disruption of indigenous communities. The international community faces the difficult task of managing this new era of Arctic resource exploitation responsibly. Ensuring sustainable development and preventing conflict will require robust diplomatic efforts and a shared commitment to preserving the Arctic's delicate ecosystem while addressing the world's growing resource needs. Russia has long viewed the Arctic as a region of paramount strategic importance. This view has translated into a significant and ongoing effort to bolster its military presence and assert its claims in the high north. Moscow has been systematically modernizing its Soviet-era military bases scattered across its extensive Arctic coastline. This includes the deployment of advanced air defense missile systems designed to protect its northern flank. Furthermore, Russia is upgrading its formidable submarine fleet, a key component of its Arctic military capabilities. These efforts are not isolated. They are part of a broader strategy to project power and secure Russian interests in a rapidly changing region. The development of Arctic infrastructure is a cornerstone of Russia's northern strategy. The nation has been actively constructing and fortifying airfields and deep-water ports along its Arctic territories. These facilities are crucial for supporting military operations and enabling commercial activities, particularly along the Northern Sea route. Russia operates the world's largest fleet of icebreakers, both nuclear-powered and conventional. These vessels are essential for clearing shipping lanes and maintaining year-round access through ice-choked waters. This ice-breaking capability gives Russia a distinct advantage in navigating and controlling movement within large swathes of the Arctic Ocean, a critical element of its regional dominance. A defining moment in Russia's assertive Arctic posture occurred in 2007. A Russian submersible planted the nation's flag on the seabed at the North Pole. This symbolic act was intended to underscore Russia's claim that the Lomonosov Ridge, an underwater mountain range, is an extension of its continental shelf. While largely symbolic, this move significantly shifted the regional tone from one of post-Cold War cooperation towards renewed competition. For Russia, the Arctic is not just a source of resources, it is vital for maintaining its geopolitical relevance on the global stage, demonstrating its capacity as a major power with far-reaching interests and capabilities. The Kremlin considers its Arctic domain integral to its national security and economic future. The region offers access to valuable natural resources, strategic maritime routes, and a platform for projecting military power. Russian officials frequently emphasize the Arctic's role in the country's economic development and its importance for future energy exports. Consequently, the continued investment in military hardware, infrastructure, and operational readiness is seen as a necessary measure to protect these vital interests. This robust military posture ensures that Russia remains a dominant player in any future discussions or disputes concerning the Arctic's governance and resources, sending a clear signal of its enduring commitment. China, despite not having any Arctic coastline, has declared itself a near-Arctic state. This self-designation underscores its growing ambitions and strategic interests in the region. Beijing aims to secure access to Arctic resources and exploit new shipping lanes, most notably the envisioned Polar Silk Road. This route, an extension of its broader Belt and Road Initiative, promises to significantly shorten shipping times between China and Europe. It could potentially reduce the maritime distance by approximately 6,400 kilometers and cut travel time from around 48 days to roughly 35 days. This potential for more efficient trade routes is a major driver of China's Arctic engagement. To realize its Arctic ambitions, China has significantly ramped up its investments in the region. It has poured capital into various Arctic projects, particularly in resource extraction and infrastructure development. Chinese companies have also been actively researching the military applications of operating in the Arctic environment. Furthermore, China is expanding its own icebreaker fleet, recognizing the crucial role these vessels play in navigating polar waters. It has established scientific research facilities in Arctic nations such as Norway, Sweden, and Iceland. While officially for scientific purposes, these facilities have raised concerns among some Western nations about their potential for dual use, including intelligence gathering or military support. The collaboration between Russia and China in the Arctic is a noteworthy development. Russian President Putin's visit to China in 2023 included discussions aimed at enhancing the integration of Russia's Northern Sea route into China's Belt and Road Initiative. This partnership could provide China with more reliable access to the NSR, while offering Russia much-needed investment and international legitimacy for its Arctic shipping corridor. However, this growing Sino-Russian alignment in the Arctic is viewed with caution by other Arctic states and NATO members who are wary of the combined influence of these two major powers in the strategically sensitive region. China's long-term goal, as articulated in some strategic documents, is to become a polar great power by 2035. This ambition reflects a comprehensive approach that encompasses economic, scientific, diplomatic, and potentially military dimensions. Chinese military strategists increasingly view the Arctic as a future zone of international competition. The country's growing presence, from research stations to investments in critical infrastructure and participation in Arctic governance forums, signals a clear intent to play a significant role in shaping the future of the High North. This proactive engagement challenges the traditional dominance of the 8 Arctic coastal states and introduces new complexities to regional geopolitics. The United States has significantly sharpened its focus on the Arctic in recent years. This heightened attention is driven by the dual challenges of accelerating climate change and the increasing strategic competition in the region. The U.S. 2022 National Strategy for the Arctic region outlines a comprehensive approach. It prioritizes enhancing military readiness and capabilities specifically tailored for Arctic operations. The strategy also emphasizes the need for robust infrastructure development, including the expansion of its icebreaker fleet, which currently lags significantly behind Russia's. This renewed focus aims to protect American sovereign rights and interests in its Alaskan Arctic territory and beyond. A key component of the U.S. strategy involves deepening collaboration with allies and partners, particularly within the NATO framework. The Department of Defense 2024 Arctic Strategy further elaborates on these objectives. It calls for building greater readiness for high-latitude operations and enhancing engagement with allied nations that share concerns about regional stability. These strategic documents were largely prompted by Russia's ongoing militarization of its Arctic territories and China's rapidly expanding ambitions and presence in the High North. The US aims to ensure that the Arctic remains a region of peaceful cooperation, but it is also preparing for scenarios involving heightened tension or conflict. The US Navy, in particular, has expressed concerns about the growing Russo-Chinese influence in the Arctic. It is actively working to enhance American icebreaker capabilities to ensure access and presence in icebound waters. Military exercises are being adapted to include more challenging Arctic scenarios, testing the US military's ability to operate effectively in extreme cold weather conditions. Improving domain awareness is another critical priority. This involves investing in better surveillance and reconnaissance technologies to monitor activities across the vast and often inhospitable Arctic landscape, ensuring the US can detect and respond to potential threats in a timely manner. Beyond military preparedness, the US strategy also acknowledges the importance of economic development and environmental protection. The 2022 National Strategy advocates for economic diversification in the American Arctic, supporting local communities and exploring opportunities in sustainable industries. It also stresses the need for a transition to green energy and robust environmental safeguards. Recently, policy actions have reflected this balance. For example, in 2024, the Department of the Interior denied commercial access to a significant copper deposit through a national park in Alaska and banned new oil drilling in a large portion of the National Petroleum Reserve Alaska, signaling a cautious approach to resource exploitation. Section 5. NATO's Arctic Shield Collective Defense in the High North. The strategic landscape of the Arctic has been significantly reshaped by recent geopolitical events, prompting NATO to strengthen its posture in the region. The accession of Finland and more recently Sweden into the alliance has dramatically enhanced NATO's presence and capabilities in the Nordic region and the wider Arctic. With these additions, 7 of the 8 Arctic Council member states are now NATO allies. This development substantially bolsters collective defense cooperation and allows for more integrated planning and operations across a vast expanse of northern Europe, extending deep into the Arctic Circle. NATO regularly conducts military exercises in the Arctic to demonstrate its readiness and interoperability. Exercises like Nordic Response, formerly known as Cold Response, involve thousands of troops from multiple allied nations practicing complex operations in challenging Arctic conditions. These maneuvers serve as a clear signal of NATO's commitment to defending its northern flank and deterring potential aggression. The Nordic countries, now largely unified within NATO, face shared security challenges. These include safeguarding critical infrastructure in the Baltic Sea and coordinating the defense of the strategically important Northcalott region, which encompasses the northernmost parts of Norway, Sweden and Finland. The alliance's increased focus on the Arctic is a direct response to Russia's sustained military buildup and assertive actions in the region. It also takes into account China's growing economic and scientific presence, which some allies view with suspicion regarding potential long-term strategic implications. NATO's approach aims to maintain freedom of navigation, ensure secure lines of communication and protect the sovereign rights of its Arctic member states. This involves enhancing surveillance capabilities, improving infrastructure suitable for Arctic operations and developing doctrines and tactics specifically adapted for the unique environmental conditions of the High North. The strengthened NATO presence in the Arctic is not solely about military deterrence, it also aims to foster stability and cooperation where possible. However, the primary driver is the changing security environment. The alliance recognizes that the Arctic can no longer be considered a zone of exceptionalism, immune from broader geopolitical tensions. Therefore, NATO is adapting its strategic thinking and operational planning to address the emerging challenges in this critical region. The goal is to ensure that the Arctic remains a secure and stable area where international law is respected and the interests of allied nations are protected effectively. Section 6, the thawing frontier, climate change and new maritime passages. Climate change is profoundly altering the Arctic's physical environment with far-reaching consequences for global shipping and regional geopolitics. The most visible impact is the accelerating melt of sea ice. This reduction in ice cover is progressively opening up new maritime routes, such as the Northern Sea Route along Russia's northern coast and the Northwest Passage through the Canadian Arctic archipelago. These routes, once largely impassable for most of the year, are becoming increasingly viable for seasonal navigation, offering potentially shorter transit times between Asia, Europe and North America. This could reduce Europe-Asia travel by as much as 40%. The potential benefits of these Arctic shipping routes have been highlighted by recent disruptions to traditional global maritime choke points. For instance, in 2023, attacks by Houthi rebels in the Red Sea severely impacted shipping through the Suez Canal. Simultaneously, a severe drought in Panama reduced the capacity of the Panama Canal. These events underscored the vulnerability of established trade arteries and increased interest in alternative routes, including those in the Arctic. The Northern Sea Route, in particular, has seen significant investment from Russia, which has committed approximately $19 billion to develop its infrastructure, hoping to turn it into a major international shipping lane. Despite the growing accessibility, Arctic shipping faces substantial challenges. Navigational risks remain high due to unpredictable ice conditions, poorly charted waters in some areas, and extreme weather events. The lack of comprehensive search and rescue infrastructure, as well as port facilities along much of these routes, adds to the operational complexities and costs. Consequently, the volume of cargo transiting the Arctic remains relatively low compared to major global shipping lanes. For example, the Northern Sea Route handled around 34 million tons of cargo in 2023, a fraction of the more than 1 billion tons that pass through the Malacca Strait annually. The environmental implications of increased Arctic shipping and resource exploitation are a significant concern. Melting permafrost, which covers about 65% of Russian territory, is already causing damage to existing infrastructure, including roads and buildings. An increase in maritime traffic heightens the risk of oil spills and other forms of pollution in a fragile ecosystem that is slow to recover. Furthermore, sanctions imposed on Russia have reportedly led to an increased use of the Northern Sea Route by a shadow fleet of tankers, often engaging in practices like spoofing their locations. This raises serious environmental and accident risks, complicating efforts to manage the Arctic's transformation responsibly. Section 7: Greenland's pivotal position, autonomy and strategic resources. Greenland, the world's largest island, holds a uniquely strategic position in the rapidly evolving Arctic. Its vast landmass is rich in natural resources, including significant deposits of rare earth metals, which are essential for many modern high-tech industries and green technologies. As global demand for these critical minerals intensifies, Greenland's resource wealth is attracting increasing attention from international powers. This economic potential is closely intertwined with Greenland's long-standing aspirations for greater autonomy from Denmark, with the ultimate goal of eventual independence, a path outlined in its 2024 strategic vision. This ambition adds another layer of complexity to Arctic geopolitics. The geopolitical significance of Greenland has been further amplified by recent global events. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022 prompted a shift in Greenland's security perspective. The government in Nuuk participated in implementing EU sanctions against Russia and engaged in heightened discussions about its own defense and security needs. Concerns have been raised about potential Russian threats, even to Nuuk itself, which is home to Denmark's Joint Arctic Command. This evolving security landscape has led Greenland to consider its international partnerships and its role in maintaining regional stability more actively than ever before. The United States has shown significantly increased interest in Greenland since 2019. This renewed engagement led to the reopening of a US consulate in Nuuk and promises of economic aid. American policymakers recognize Greenland's strategic location, situated between North America and Europe, and its importance for monitoring activities in the Arctic Ocean and the North Atlantic. The development of infrastructure in Greenland is also a key focus. For instance, the expansion of Nuuk's airport, largely funded by Denmark, is set to enable direct flights to New York. This project is also seen as a way to limit potential Chinese involvement in critical Greenlandic infrastructure projects. As Greenland moves towards greater self-governance, it faces the challenge of balancing its economic development needs with environmental protection and the preservation of its unique cultural heritage. The decisions made in Nuuk regarding resource extraction, foreign investment and security partnerships will have significant implications not only for Greenlanders, but also for the broader Arctic region. In 2025, Greenland, along with Denmark and the Faroe Islands, will assume the chairmanship of the Arctic Council. This will provide an important platform for them to shape the agenda for Arctic cooperation, particularly focusing on the Council's future and its ability to navigate an increasingly competitive international environment. Section 8. The Dragon and the Bear Sino-Russian Arctic Entente and its boundaries. The relationship between China and Russia in the Arctic is a complex tapestry woven with threads of shared interests and underlying caution. Both nations have demonstrated assertive postures in the North American Arctic through rhetoric and strategic investments, but their direct joint military activity in the European Arctic, closer to NATO's core, has remained somewhat limited. Their collaboration appears to be cautious and incremental, driven more by pragmatic considerations than a deep-seated ideological alignment in the polar region. Both countries seek to challenge what they perceive as Western dominance, but their individual Arctic priorities sometimes diverge, leading to a nuanced partnership. Russia, while welcoming Chinese investment in certain Arctic projects, such as the Yamal LNG facility, remains wary of China's long-term ambitions in a region it considers its own strategic backyard. Moscow has been careful to maintain control over key aspects of Arctic development, particularly concerning its northern sea route and energy resources. Strict controls are often enforced on Chinese involvement in Russian energy projects, reflecting a desire to prevent excessive dependency or the ceding of strategic leverage. Russia aims to be the dominant power in its Arctic territories, utilizing Chinese capital where beneficial, but without compromising its sovereign authority or strategic autonomy. However, Russia's increasing international isolation following its full-scale invasion of Ukraine and subsequent Western sanctions may compel Moscow to become more accommodative of Chinese interests in the Arctic. As traditional economic and political partners in the West distance themselves, Russia may find itself more reliant on China for investment, technology, and diplomatic support for its Arctic endeavors. This shifting dynamic could potentially grant Beijing greater influence over Arctic developments than Moscow might ideally prefer, altering the balance within their polar partnership and potentially leading to deeper, though perhaps still constrained, cooperation in the High North. Despite the potential for closer ties, fundamental differences in their Arctic identities and long-term goals persist. Russia is an established Arctic coastal state with inherent sovereign rights and a vast Arctic territory. China, conversely, is a self-declared near-Arctic state seeking access and influence. This disparity means their strategic calculus will not always align perfectly. While both may share an interest in promoting multipolarity and challenging US influence globally, the specifics of their Arctic engagement will continue to be shaped by a careful weighing of national interests, with Russia unlikely to grant China unrestricted access or influence in its strategically vital northern frontier without significant benefits. Section 9. Navigating Troubled Waters, Cooperation, Conflict, and Environmental Stewardship. The Arctic Council, established in 1996, has long served as the primary intergovernmental forum for promoting cooperation, coordination, and interaction among Arctic states, indigenous communities, and other inhabitants on sustainable development and environmental protection. However, its effectiveness has been severely hampered following Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Most of the Council's work was paused, and Russia, a major Arctic power, has been largely sidelined from active participation in many of its working groups. This has weakened the Council's diplomatic standing and its ability to address pressing regional challenges comprehensively. The upcoming 2025 chairmanship by Greenland, Denmark, and the Faroe Islands will focus significantly on the Council's survival and potential reshaping. The potential for conflict in the Arctic extends beyond state-level military tensions. Disputes over fisheries, for instance, have reportedly increased 20-fold in recent decades. These conflicts often arise from disagreements over fishing grounds and changing fish stock distributions, which are themselves driven by warming waters due to climate change. The Bering Sea, for example, sees notable tension over the valuable pollock fishery between the US and Russia. Furthermore, illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing is recognized by the US Congress and Coast Guard as a significant national and global maritime security challenge, further straining resources and international relations in the Arctic. Concerns over infrastructure security have also grown. A disturbing pattern of infrastructure sabotage has emerged in regions adjacent to the Arctic, with incidents involving Chinese ships allegedly damaging undersea communication cables. Such events highlight the vulnerability of critical maritime infrastructure, which is essential for global communication and commerce. Greenland's 2024 national strategy explicitly emphasizes the need to protect its critical infrastructure from undue foreign ownership and influence. It also calls for enhancing cybersecurity measures following recent cyber espionage attacks and disruptive power outages, reflecting a growing awareness of these non-traditional security threats in the High North. Ultimately, the future of the Arctic hinges on balancing burgeoning economic interests with the imperative of environmental protection and the maintenance of international peace. The viability of Arctic trade routes and sustainable resource extraction will depend not only on technological advancements and shifting global power dynamics, but also on the establishment of robust cooperative frameworks. The United States' 2022 Arctic strategy acknowledges this by advocating for economic diversification, a transition towards green energy, and stringent environmental protection measures. Navigating this new era in the Arctic demands foresight, diplomacy, and a renewed commitment to international cooperation, even amidst rising geopolitical competition, to prevent the region from becoming a new Cold War theater.